So session is now over. We've been done for a week. Seems like a few months, but we've been done for a week. And slowly can kind of take a breath. I do want to, there's a lot of things I want to tell you, but I also want to take plenty of time at the end to be able to answer questions. I've found over the years that's the best way to do this, that then you actually leave here with the information that you need to know. And Rebecca Kelty, wave your hand, Rebecca. So Rebecca she's also a representative on the west side of Powers. On the east side of Powers, she's west side of Powers. And so I'm glad she's here because there's going to be a bunch of stuff that I'm talking about, a bunch of bills and a bunch of things, and I want to make sure that we get you the information you need, and so if I've got any gaps, then she can fill those in. And I do want to say this publicly. I've said this to a lot of people privately, but I was very impressed with Rebecca this last year, this session. She did get up and fight and fought some difficult fights, and that's not easy in that room. When everybody is wanting you from both sides of the aisle, when everybody is wanting you to cave and give in and do that kind of stuff, she held strong. She didn't take my advice every time. She actually held strong against me a couple times, which I think is a huge mistake, but she did. And I was impressed, I really was. When somebody gets elected, you don't know when the pressure, when they get in a situation, the pattern is most everybody caves. And they become something that's a very watered down version of what they verbalized. And I think with Rebecca, it might have been the opposite. I think she got stronger through the session. And so yeah. So here's I'm going to try to give you a quick recap of all of this stuff. So there's a couple of the basic things that you guys have been paying attention to. 1312, how many of you know what House Bill 1312 is about? Okay. Most people know about that. How about Senate Bill 003? How many of you know what that is about? Okay, I'm going to talk about those, but I want to talk about a much bigger subject here, and that is that those two bills are part of a much larger pattern that's been, the 3 years that I've been in the House now, they have been pushing these things on us very strongly, and they're part of a systematic development over time. Okay, let me use Senate Bill 3 first to kind of set up how structurally this works, so you kind of see this. So Senate Bill 3 was the anti-2A Second Amendment bill, and this is the most egregious bill that has ever come, an anti-gun bill that has ever come into any setting across the entire United States. We are pushing limits on how bad and how liberal we're becoming in our state. This is the worst anti-gun bill that's ever existed. And it's basically taking about 90% of the guns away. And I've been talking to a lot of my friends that are gun shop owners and range owners and things, and we're walking down through this, and one gun shop in particular, a very large place, and we're just walking along and saying, yeah, this whole row of guns you can't sell, this whole row of guns you can't sell. Now there's little things I've also told them kind of, because I've read the bill like 30 times and I know how the bill works, I've also given them some ways to get around it, and we didn't actually talk about those. There's 2 or 3 really easy ways to get around the stupidity of the bill, but we didn't make those known in the House because we don't want them to put amendments in to stop that, right? And here's the other thing, that's already going into lawsuit. CSSA and RNGO are suing these, and so this is not a constitutional bill. A lot of the other things they trim on the edges, and so they kind of stay enough that it's going to be a hard fight in the courts. They're still not constitutional because it says shall not be infringed, but these kind of stay at least a little bit out of the lawsuit range, makes it more difficult. 003 is right in the middle of it. It's going to go into lawsuit, and it will lose because it's the most egregious unconstitutional thing that's ever been tried anywhere. And so that's a little bit of I guess the shining light that says maybe this won't destroy our state. I talked with somebody a good long while yesterday that has 3 or 4 different gun shops in different places, They're saying this is, if this doesn't get sued, this will shut down every one of our stores. And I was up at Shields the other day, and this is a different gun bill. This is the one that has to do with ammunition. You have to be 21 years old to buy ammunition, and all of it has now to be behind the counter, behind glass, all this other stuff. And Shields is already building all of this structure. I was so irritated with this walking along. My second son, he's 29. He's walking there with me, and we're looking at all this stuff they've been doing, and I got frustrated right there, and I started telling, you know what this is? This is unfunded mandates. This is unfunded mandates. They cannot be. And then pretty soon, some of the workers were standing there looking at. I turned around to them, and they're like, "You're right. It's unfunded mandate." This is hundreds of thousands of dollars that Shields has to do because some knuckleheads in the House think they're smarter and they don't want people to have ammunition, and so now these stores have to build all this stuff. Literally, and even small shops, tens of thousands of dollars to comply with a stupid, unconstitutional law to begin with. So this is the kind of stuff that we've been fighting this last year. So then 1312, a lot of you know about 1312. This is the bill that is the transgender push, transgender ideology. Let me explain kind of the original and then explain how it was changed a little bit, but not a lot, and then I'll explain the big picture. So basically it was going to take your children away if you don't adhere to a transgender ideology. That's a very simplistic way to explain it, but that's what it's going to do. It is a, and here, this is important as you're processing through this information. LGB, the LGBTQ plus, whatever. LGB is a sexual preference. That is a lifestyle built around sexual decisions, right? The TQ plus is an ideology. It's not a sexual preference, it's an ideology, and it's a controlling ideology. It's a Marxist mindset that says we're going to tell you what to do, you're going to do what we want you to do, you're going to use the pronouns we want, we will come after your kids, we will come after teachers, we will come after schools, everything. That's because it's an ideology, it's not a sexual preference, right? This is something that is used to control, and it's based in Marxism. Just like we found out that Black Lives Matter was actually a Marxist organization, started with their website, explained how they were a Marxist organization. That's what the transgender movement is. It's a Marxist controlling thing. That's why they have to come after you kids, and that's why they have to make you say certain words, use certain terminology. Okay, I'm gonna probably get back to that in a little bit, because I want to explain the bigger picture of the transgender stuff that's going on with that. But that one was changed in the Senate. They took out a couple sections which took out part of the language about taking your children away. But here's what most people don't know. Children are already being taken from their parents because of the ideology. We had 5 or 6 people that testified on the House side and even more on the Senate side that their children have already been taken away because they didn't adhere to the transgender ideology. What this law was going to do, what 1312 was going to do, was just codify it, simplistically codify it. So, and this is where we're at in Colorado now, is the Democrats have been controlling this for so long that now the gloves are off, they don't care what the people think. They're going to come out and tell you right to your face, we're coming for your kids, we're going to do this, there's nothing you can do to stop it. This is what they tell us regularly in that place. We've argued many times over that this bill or this bill or this bill is not constitutional. And last year, I had this said to me 3 times publicly from the well, is we're going to pass the laws. If you think they're not constitutional, sue us. They don't care. They know they're not constitutional. They do not care about the Constitution. They don't care about the rule of law. They are going to do what they want to do the way they want to do it. I had a guy, I was on the phone this morning, and I had a guy talking to me about a little bit of this, and he said, it's got to the place in Colorado now. He said, tell me if this is just crazy thinking, or am I at least close? He said, the House and the Senate, they could come up with a law. Let's say the law is, we're going to kill every white male over 70. And it passed through the House and the Senate, and they voted it in. Our state would have to do that. He said, is that absolutely crazy? I said, no, we're doing that with kids already. We're doing this with healthcare. We debated 4 or 5 different healthcare bills that basically are taking the ability to check for different kinds of cancer, prostate, diabetes, and all those things. We did away with those because the budget's tight. We're doing away with preventive health care now in the state of Colorado because the budget's tight and we need to fund $500 million to illegal immigrants. $500 million, while we cannot test for different kinds of cancer now. And we debated this stuff for hours. And they said, well, that's what it's going to be. We made sure that $92 million went to illegal immigrant child care. We also have another $500 million that went to, actually this is about $350 million, went to transgender care. Cosmetic surgeries, and the bill has the list of them. We actually got up at the podium and read through the list. All kinds of cosmetic surgery, almost anything that you can imagine for cosmetic surgery. Adding lips, adding butt, adding other things. And this is now going to be paid for if you're transgender. Not if you just need it. Not if you've had a horrible accident and you need some cosmetic surgery. No, only if you're a transgender. But they did make a nice little carve out too that says if you're a transgender illegal immigrant, you can also have access to this. But not the citizens of Colorado. This is something we dealt with every single day after day. I had one of a person that works with me in a future endeavor I'm planning, and he asked me the other day, he said, can you put together a list of certain things? One of them is, he said, I need to know the top 3 most egregious bills that came through the House. How do I do that? You can't do that. The top 3? How about the top 25? We're dealing with this stuff. They're coming after our kids. They have this murderous intent for our children right now. Their hands are dripping with the blood of our children. And they're coming after our kids. They're wanting to have these surgeries. They're wanting to have all this stuff. I tried to pass a bill this session to make any kind of medical procedure that is done on a minor that you have to have parental consent. The Democrats voted it down 100%, unanimously. No parental consent on any medical procedure, none, 0. You can have a 12-year-old have sex change surgery in the state of Colorado, funded by the state of Colorado, no parental consent, no parental knowledge that it's happening. Some of you with young children, think about what I just said. You won't know it's happening. And we had many people come and testify that their children were put into that pipeline. One of the names that people recognize the most is Erin Lee. Her child was being put into that pipeline, and her child was headed for a sex change surgery, hormonal therapies, all this stuff, and she did not know about it. Her mother did not know about it, and she caught it in time. And a lot of these kids' parents, they don't catch it in time, and it's already started happening. We have many, many people testifying that that's already the case. It's already been going on. So let me give you some more. Let me give you kind of the overview first. All right. So we had 657 bills introduced this last year. And some of you are like, that is crazy high. Well, it's lower than the last 2 years. Last 2 years we've been over 700. Now, do we need 700 new laws every year? I mean, seriously, think about that. You can't even sit down and come up with them. If you could come up with 100, I would be impressed. 100 new laws that we need, and we introduced 657. 100. This was by this morning. We already know some things that have been happening this afternoon with the speaker and the governor. But 197 have already been signed by the governor. 102 were sent to the governor. One of them was vetoed. Does anybody know what bill was vetoed by the governor? Any idea?
Social media.
Social media. And I've been getting some things online where people are saying, well, first, my wife asked me today, she said, when you voted to veto this bill, or voted to support the veto, I said, I didn't. She said, I think so. It's all on social media. I said, no, we didn't get the chance. They realized they didn't have the votes to knock the veto off, and so they just postponed it indefinitely till the end of the session. But I did vote against the bill. I actually voted with Governor Polis. That's difficult to say out loud. But because it's going to control a lot of things to do with social media, and they say, well, it puts safeguards and all kinds of things. Yeah, but who's deciding these safeguards? Who is Big Brother deciding on? It's the state of Colorado. And that's the part where you have to be careful, because most of the bills, Representative DeGraff, one of our strongest conservatives in the House, he always says, here's the basic way you know a bill. What it says it is, it ain't. And that's the truth. Whatever the title says, look deeper, because it's usually the opposite of what's going on there. We also had still processing, so that puts quite a few hundred bills that are still being processed. We have, the speaker was working on some today, signed some today, many will still go to the governor's desk. So if you're in session and a bill gets finished during session and gets sent to the governor's desk, he has 10 days to sign it. This is where 003, the gun bill, had to be signed. If after 10 days he doesn't sign it, automatically becomes a law. Okay, which, by the way, I'm going to change that. Maybe if something in the future happens. So I'm going to change that, because that's not the legitimate way that governance should work. But 10 days, then it becomes law if he doesn't sign. It's just a way for the governor to get a little cover, but I don't think that actually happens. If it happens at the end of session and they are sent to the governor's desk at the end of session, then he has 30 days to sign it. Okay, so that's the 30 days that we're in right now, and so bills are moving slowly. The governor's trying to give some, like 1312, trying to give them time so that people forget. And by the way, we're good at that. Specifically, the Republicans and the conservatives in the state, we forget pretty quickly what's been happening. And so that's where he's at right now, is to take that 30 days. So here's some bills that we ran, but got knocked down in the process. Like I said, I ran one for parental rights in medical, in any medical procedure. Representative DeGraff ran one that was parental rights in a general sense, that parents are in charge of their own children. That was actually, I think, a resolution. Does that sound right? So we did see some of the bills this year actually got postponed. See, here's what happened. We had to cut $1.5 billion from the budget. We didn't, and we lied about it, and we acted like all these bills that are coming through didn't have fiscal note. That's how they do it, is the nonpartisan legal staff, they say, well, this bill doesn't have any fiscal note. It's not going to cost anything. But if it does, we're expecting people to donate money to the state to cover it. Has anybody ever donated to the state to cover a law? So, and they know that, but it's a way they can get in and say there's no fiscal note. There was a lot of lying. I also said on appropriations, which if a bill costs money, has to come through appropriations last. And so I sit on appropriations, and it's amazing how something would have a $600,000 note, and the next week it comes to appropriations, and it has a $2,000 note. You're like, how'd that happen? Well, we figured it out. No, you didn't. You're liars. That's what you did. And so we didn't cut $1.5 billion. What we did is we added a bunch of stuff, but because of this, the Democrats were actually fighting against each other to a great extent this year, which was fun. I gotta tell you, there's many times we just sat back and watched them and enjoyed it. You know, you want to walk up there to the mic and say, "Did you hear what he said about you?" And then just go sit down. But that's rude. So, but here's one of the big things that happened this year that really I hadn't seen this, and a lot of people said that they hadn't seen this either. But we started seeing. So there's something at the state, in the treasurer's office at the state, which, by the way, you need to make a note to yourself to do this, okay? There is a whole area that has literally billions of dollars in it that is unclaimed property. So let's say you get a refund from King Soopers. I don't know why, but you get a refund of $20, and they can't find you. You moved, and they can't find you. They send it to the state, and it sits at the state and waits. I've been hearing about this the last couple of years. Hadn't done anything this year. I said I'm going to do something about it. Looked it up, and the state had about $500 sitting there waiting for me. And Rebecca has done this many, many times over the years. I didn't know it existed. She said she's had $8,000 that she's claimed from this. You guys may have money sitting there, okay? Has your name on it, it belongs to you. But here's what the Democrats started doing this year, first time ever, is they said we can't afford this bill, this law to be instituted, so we're going to borrow out of the unclaimed property money. Which belongs to who? You. This isn't like Tabor, taxes that you paid in, there's too much that you get, which still does belong to you, by the way. This is actually your name's attached to it. When I went in there and looked up my name had like 3 things on it for 100 here, 200 here, something like that. That is my name's attached to it. That's my money that the state doesn't have anything to do with. It came from somewhere else, and it belongs to me. Okay? So I would suggest that all of you, tonight, tomorrow, and if you have questions, Becca can tell you how to do this easily because it's like her side job. So go get your unclaimed property. And I'm telling you this from a selfish point of view because I don't want 1 penny sitting there when the state reaches in to steal the people's money. That's your money. And we all went down and fought for this. We all did. I went down and read a list of names of people. And I told them, on this list, go to the state website, on this list, not one of those names is state of Colorado. One of them was Scott Bottoms. Apparently a lot of them, Rebecca Kelty. So it belongs to you, but the state does not mind. Now there's one bill, they said, well, all we're doing is we're just taking, we're borrowing from the interest off that money. Well, it's still not theirs, but that's really being pretty disingenuous because all the rest of the bills were dipping into the fund itself. And here's the thing, is however much money it is, all these different bills now are dipping into it, and it adds up way more than what the amount of money in there is. So how are they all going to dip into the same pot that does not belong to them? Because this is the stuff, when people ask me all the time, have you ever seen like corrupt stuff going on? It's harder to find stuff that's not corrupt going on. This is a very corrupt state. We have state representatives that have nonprofits that are making hundreds and hundreds. One person has already made over $1 million as a nonprofit off of state donations to their nonprofit. They're paying all of their family members. We know this. There's been articles done about it. We know the family members' names that are getting the money. But that falls under the purview of the Attorney General. Right, you see the problem here. Our corrupt Attorney General, our corrupt Secretary of State, both of them should be in jail. They're not going to do any of this kind of stuff. But here's the fun thing that we get to say, and I've said many times in the Capitol this last year, is the hammer's about to drop. Attorney General Bondi, Tom Holman, illegal immigration, they were coming for the state of Colorado. DOJ sued Colorado 2 weeks ago. We've been in a bubble in Colorado for so long that the minority, which is the conservatives, have not been able to actually get the word out. We can't get it outside of Colorado. It's very, very difficult because the media inside Colorado works intentionally against us. Okay? See how much of this I can say now. Well, I can say this part. So this whole transgender thing, right? That's an ideology. The Speaker of the House is very adamant about protecting that ideology. The last 2 years, not this year, but 2 years before, I was kicked out of the well many, many times, gavelled down, screamed at by the Speaker of the House, screamed at by the Majority Leader. They take you to the office all to the side and they yell and scream at you, do all this stuff. Mostly I do this because of my maturity level, but I'll sit and listen to them, and I did this many different times. I'll say, "You're not my boss. Nah, you're not my boss." And at one time I called the majority leader a bully. She lost it for about 30 minutes and sat and screamed at me. And there was another representative, Representative Bradley was in there, and she's screaming at me. Finally she turns to Representative Bradley and said, "What do you think I should do about this? He just called me a bully." And she said, "Maybe you should stop being a bully." Here's what they're doing. They're pushing the transgender ideology over people, over circumstances. I was gavelled down many times last year, specifically on 2 bills, because I told them, and I think this video is online and some things like this, you can go look at it, but I told them I don't adhere to your ideology. The idea of misgendering, I don't believe in. That's a made-up thing you made up, and I'm not part of that world. There is no such thing as misgendering to me. Those are fake words. Dead naming, those are fake words. I do not adhere to that ideology, and I never will. And that made them so mad, and they would kick me out of the well. And I did sue the governor and the Speaker of the House, and they really calmed down after that. And they stopped kicking me out of the well. I didn't get kicked out of the well, I don't think, any this session. Rebecca did once, but here's the thing, and it's not like I don't push the limits, I push the same limits, but they're now scared of me. I sued them and it was effective. And so the transgender thing is still the deal, and here's what's happened, is we've had transgender representatives, transgender aides that have been harassing women in that Capitol for a long time. This year, finally, some aides stood up and said, "We're not going to take this anymore." They made a formal complaint. HR handled it improperly. There's a lawsuit waiting there, and I'm helping them navigate that. So is Rebecca. We're helping these aides navigate this because the Speaker of the House and the Democrat leftist in that House, they are crucifying these women because their ideology of transgenderism is more important than women. They don't care about women, women's rights. Boys and girls sports, they like that. Boys and girls bathrooms, they like that. It's their ideology and they're going to push it through. And some brave aides this year finally stood up. We've been in the process with them. The Speaker was bullying them with confidentiality rules and all this stuff. And I'm talking to these ladies and telling them, they're bullying you. They actually don't have, there is no such thing. They already broke the confidentiality by leaking it. The Democrats leaked it to the press and leaked it to some lawyers that came after these girls and have been strongly coming after them. So, I can announce this, I think. I will. I don't need your permission. So, so this is going to, tomorrow I'm going to be on, you guys know who Todd Starnes is with Fox News? Yes. Maybe on Todd Starnes' show tomorrow about this. But then Friday, the aides are now going to go with me and we're going to be on Fox and Friends Friday morning. All right. Because it's about time we stop this Marxist bullying joke that is called the Speaker of the House and the House itself. These guys are unconstitutional, illegal, law-breaking bullies, and they don't mind destroying young professional women's lives in the process. They don't care. They don't care if they destroy them. They don't care if they ruin their political aspirations. They come after them. And so I said, okay, then you gotta. And part of the reason that I'm doing this is to be protection between the girls and the Speaker of the House and those kind of things. But I made it very clear to the Speaker of the House, you can't just bully these women by themselves because now you're going to go through me to do this. And I'm not scared of the Speaker of the House. I'm not going to let her bully. She knows she can't bully me. And these girls have stood strong, they're women, they have stood very strong in this process. And now they're going to get the national stage to be able to tell the story of what's happening. And after all the complaints and all the stuff were made, one of these transgender aides that had been going in the bathroom there, and they're harassing these ladies, he started stalking them around the Capitol. And every time they would be somewhere, and this was the response of the Speaker of the House. Instead of saying, no boys in girls' bathrooms, that's what she should have said, right? She didn't say that. What she did is she told these girls, we'll stay in public areas and stay together. And if you have to go to the bathroom, both of you go together in case he's there. Maybe go in and check and see if he's there. He's a dude in a girl's bathroom. He should be kicked out of the bathroom, right? He should be arrested. This is sexual harassment. But Speaker of the House protects the ideology over women. You know, one of the things that I've been processing with boys and girls sports and all this stuff, where are the feminists of the 60s and 70s?
Amen. Amen.
I was a kid in the 70s. I grew up in the 70s. I remember the feminist movement came out of the 60s. I remember, and there was a lot of good things, but there was some militant stuff, right? And then moved into the 80s, not really, but sort of. Where are these women that fought for Title IX? That fought for girls to have equal sports in high school and college that the boys have always had. They fought for decades for this. And now they're letting boys go into these sports that they fought so strongly for. I don't understand. It's so upside down and weird to me that this is where we've arrived at. So let me look through my list to make sure. Oh, also 1312. It got all the media, but here's another thing that's important. 1309 was attached to it, and 1309 funds all of the transition surgeries, funds all the cosmetic surgeries, funds all the stuff that 1312 is trying to push through in the process. I mentioned my parental consent. Also, I tried to pass a bill this last session to make human trafficking minors across state lines actually punishable by crime. And they voted unanimously against it. Human trafficking of minors. You know why they did that? Because Colorado is a destination state for abortions. And they want these girls that these pimps have in Oklahoma or Kansas or something. They bring a van load of these girls to Colorado, and all their abortions are paid for by the state now, which, by the way, we also passed that law. Remember when everybody voted on Amendment 79? To constitutionalize abortion, everybody was saying, well, it says it's not going to have a fiscal note. The state's not going to pay for it. And people that knew, like me, were shouting, do not believe the liars. It's going to be paid for by the state. We passed that law this session also. Now all abortions used to be paid for by this major donor company group, nonprofit, that would pay for all these abortions. Now it's paid for by you. You're paying for the abortions. Not just the ones in Colorado, but all of these girls that are being shipped across state lines to have these abortions. And I tried to get that made illegal. It already is illegal, but to actually do something about it, and they voted unanimously against it. Brandy Bradley also tried to get a bill passed that said life-sustaining treatment for minors is a parent's rights issue. Anything to do with life-sustaining treatment for kids should be. Now the reason is because, and I met the family who was involved in this actually in Arizona this last year, but there was a family that their child came in to an emergency and they were having complications with the child, and so they didn't tell the parents, didn't get the permission of the parents, didn't do anything, and they pulled the plug on the child. Without anybody knowing, the child then dies, and then they tell the parents. That is evil. And so that bill, she tried to get that one passed. It just said, you have to at least ask the parent. What world do we live in that we have to make that a law? Yeah. But that's what Colorado is right now. Another big one that happened, I mentioned to you the ammunition bill too, but also gun shows. They came after gun shows really strongly. Now gun shows have to have all this extra security, you have to have video. And I mentioned in committee, because it came to my committee, I mentioned that a lot of people that go to gun shows, even if they're not planning on buying a gun at the gun show, the fact that you're putting video cameras up everywhere, half those people won't even go to gun shows anymore. Which, by the way, is what they want. Yeah. They want to shut down all the gun shows. And they make all these extra rules about gun shows. Because all these people got up and said they watched people walking out with AK-47s and silencers and all this. We still have the other stupid law they passed that you have to wait 3 days. Nobody walks out of a gun show with a gun. You don't do it. But they had all these people that testify, oh, it happens all the time. No, it doesn't happen. I go to many gun shows. It does not happen. But the truth is not something they struggle with on that side of the aisle. So I think that's all I'm going to cover right now. I'll answer any questions, anything that I can help you with about any of these bills or anything else that you would like to talk about.
The union bill.
And Kendrick has the microphone.
Working on it.
Ask the question in the microphone. The reason is because then everybody gets to hear the questions.
Okay, we're good.
You want to do it?
Yep, I got you. Hands.
Somebody up here said something. Right here. And he's wearing the flag.
What are the circumstances of the union bill? Approval by the governor, veto by the governor, what?
I don't know the end of that one yet. But here was the bill, in case you don't know what it's about. So Colorado is a right-to-work state. In other words, you can be part of an electrician, you can be an electrician, a plumber, or whatever, and you do not have to be part of a union if you don't want to. Now, if you're not part of the union, you don't get the benefits of the union, which makes sense, and nobody disagrees with that. But now they passed the law that if a group, let's say a group of electricians, now want to unionize, you used to have 2 votes. You have the core vote of like the leadership team, and then you bring it to the larger body, and 75% of that has to approve that to become unionized. They took the second vote away, and so depending on how many people are there and whether or not that constitutes a quorum, because you only need 50% to constitute a quorum, so you already only have half of the people there to begin with, and you only have to have, I think it was 35% of that, of the quorum, or whatever. Either way, it's a smaller number. They can vote it in without a second vote. And so what's going to happen is you're going to get a handful of people in all these different groups around the state of Colorado, plumbers, electricians, concrete workers, roofers, whatever. And literally a small handful of people can vote to unionize, even though this is a right-to-work state. And now that entire group has to be part of the union, whether they want to or not. Now, I do know that there are some places where the union is important and it has a place, but I'm not much for modern unions in today's society. Back in the day, yeah, unions were necessary, but it's become something crazy right now. In fact, I've got friends that work for the railroad, and they've told me that they're an engineer, and the train has stopped, and they need somebody needs to go turn this handle. He said, it's 10 feet over here. He said, I cannot walk over and turn that handle. We got to call somebody from the yard that has the approval to turn that handle. And because it's union, and so they'll wait 3 or 4 hours for somebody to come turn that handle. He said, all I had to do was reach over and turn it, but I can't because it's union, and union controls everything. That's what just got voted in. I don't know if the governor's going to sign it. The governor acts like he is a right-to-work state person, and that is our state, is right to work. So I'm hoping he doesn't sign it, but he signed it yesterday. So I don't think he's as much a right-to-work state guy as I thought he was. So there you go. It's official.
What do you know about Tina Peters, and what's the latest?
So I was talking with some of Tina's people this morning, and so you guys know that Trump and the DOJ has stepped into this space, and Trump is saying, let her go. Okay. Some people were talking, went and saw her and talked to her this morning. I'm going to go see her this next week. They were saying all of a sudden now she's being treated better, better clothes, in a different space. It's amazing what just a little glance from the president will do to all of the police and security guards and everybody that are part of that. They said that she's already being treated better, but there's no timeline or anything on this. And you guys understand that Trump doesn't necessarily have domain over this from the federal government. This is a state issue. But when the president mentions your name a handful of times from national media, now our state they're stubborn. Our attorney general is stubborn. Again, he's also broken and needs to be in jail, but he's going to hold out. He's going to do everything he can to hold out. The state's going to hold out because They hate Trump so bad. We had to sit and listen, and it seemed like every other bill that was brought up to the podium through the House this last session had to do it because there's this horrible dictator in the White House now, this horrible regime that's destroying everybody's life, blah, blah, blah. And these people hate him so bad, but I think it's okay because it's going to benefit me personally over the next year and a half. So, but they're doubling down. They're doubling down on Dumb right now, and they're going to make sure that they stand up against Trump. But Tina, there's a light at the end of the tunnel for her. It's looking really good. Keep praying, please. And if you can send letters or whatever to the governor, whatever you want to do there, put pressure on the governor, because he's already feeling it now from the national level. And remember, Polis wants to be president. He wants it so bad. So we gotta feed that. You know, write him a letter. If you're going to be president, you better let Tina go. Look how good you will look in the state if you let Tina go right now. You know, those kind of things. So, anybody else?
Hi, just out of curiosity, how many aides are there involved in this situation with the speaker?
Okay, so I want to be careful with some of this. There's a lot of people that have complained over the last few years about this. In fact, I got a call from a senator from 2017, 2018, and he said this stuff was already starting to happen back then. There's been a lot of people that complained. There's been a handful of aides that complained in this official complaint, but I don't want to necessarily give a number because some of them are not wanting to be involved publicly. They wanted the complaint to go through because they knew it was the right thing. But when they started getting slammed by the speaker and slammed by the Democrat Party, they didn't realize they were going to be the guilty, horrible people in the storyline. And so some of them kind of backed away. But there's two of them that will be on Fox with us Wednesday. I think I can say Friday. Yeah.
So I'm curious about your thoughts on House Bill 1315 and 1319 that were presented by Minority Leader Rose Puglisi and Senator Kirkmeyer that change of vacancy committee laws. I'm just curious your thoughts about it, and also, is it going to affect your vacancy?
Check is in the mail.
It will affect everybody's seat. Both of these bills will affect everybody's seat. These are both of them were very bad bills, and almost all of the Republicans took a pretty strong stand, at least against 1319. I don't think not quite as many Republicans took a stand against 15. 15 actually was a little more petty in how the bill is written, and it was designed specifically for a specific time and place and a person. 19 basically hinders our vacancy laws and how our caucus and assembly work going toward primary. Okay, all of it's kind of convoluted together. It's a bad bill. Most of us Republicans weren't in favor of it. Now here's where we are different than the Democrats. The Democrats are in lockstep with whatever the governor tells them, and specifically the majority leader. Whatever they tell them to do, they do. There was a few strays this year. There's always a few strays every year, but they do what they're supposed to do because they're threatened with getting reelected or not. Okay? And the Republican Party went out the same way. If we disagree with a fellow member's bill, we won't attack them, but we'll get up and speak against it. And we saw that happen 20, 25, 30 times this session. That was one of the worst ones, from my perspective, from a Republican to have a Republican run that. That was one of the worst for me this year. But we were really being pushed this year from the governor to the majority leader to the minority leader to be bipartisan. And we had a lot of Republicans getting on bills that they should not have been on. very bad bills, and they were stacking up on these things. Well, that actually hurts us. They like to say, no, that proves we're all getting along. Well, yeah, if you walk over into the cesspool and you play in the cesspool, then yeah, you're getting along. But if you actually stand for principles that say, no, I don't go into the cesspool, then it looks like you're not getting along. And so there was some of that back and forth, and some behind the scenes stuff where we're really trying to take care of stuff, and we've had some disagreements with the caucus and some of that kind of thing. But usually those things, you figure out how to make it work. I keep telling the representatives, and I think Kelty would agree to this, the stronger you take on conservative stances, the more people want to vote you back in. When you're just part of the slimy soup, people don't want to vote you back in. It wasn't my statement, but when Rebecca said on Free State, I think, let's burn the state down and start over, most Coloradans liked it. They didn't dislike it. And that's sometimes you can't convince people that like to move toward the middle, you can't convince them of that. And so they get on bad bills, they run bad bills, they do some things like that. So we'll see how it plays out. It's not necessarily going to affect me in new endeavor that I'm doing, but it could, and it won't necessarily affect my seat because I'm not quitting that seat, I'm just not running for it again. Okay, because you can't run for two offices at the same time. If I were to like drop out now, it would greatly affect how my seat would be filled. And in a bad way. Both of those bills, in a bad way, it would affect my seat.
So you know this is going to be about education. So on the one hand, it's awesome that they dismantle the National Department of Education, but eventually it's going to make it to the states where they have oversight. Well, the oversight over education in this state anyway, sucks. There is no accountability. Monies could be reported missing. No, literally, millions are reported missing, and it's like, and as you know, the State Department Board of Education has a supermajority Democrat. It worries me that monies are not, that the accountability or oversight is coming to each state. And I know this may not be a fair question because it hasn't happened yet. Could you please put some thoughts into how we're going to manage this? Because they are getting at our children at the education level. Big time. Big time. And it is, I hope it becomes one of your bigger priorities, because if we have oversight of the monies that the schools, the districts get to spend, it could be so abused, and it is so abused already. So.
Yeah. So the way you said that it's not happening yet. It's already happening. It's been happening for a long time. Education, the money's going into education, is one of the most corrupt places within our state. Because they have all of these funds that are set aside before you deal with the budget. They set all these monies aside for education, and then they fight for education in the budget, so they get all this extra money, although it's already sitting there waiting. And then they get all this extra money in the budget for education. And here's where a lot of this stuff went to this year. We took a lot of money from education in the general sense, and we funneled it into education for illegal immigrants. That's where a lot of money went this year. They have to hide it a little bit, although really they didn't so much. They did last year, but they're kind of, I'm telling you, they just got to the point now where they don't care what the people think. And they're going to do what they want. They did that, and then we saw where there was money going into certain departments, and they took them back out to put them in more of the arenas that would fund the transgender ideology and some of this other stuff. So that's where a lot of the, and this was very blatantly done, where teachers are not getting a raise, but we're making sure that hundreds of millions of dollars are going to go to teaching transgenderism. And there was a couple bills that specifically was the heart of the bill, is we're going to have a group that is now going to be judging all of the schools in the state of Colorado to make sure that they're teaching all the transgender stuff. Well, this is a whole committee that's set up that costs a lot of money. And then they're going to be, I guess, grading or policing this across the state. While teachers are not getting raises, why don't you spend that few $100 million and give some teachers raises? And here's another thing when it comes to education that people don't process. Most of the monies in education right now over the last decade, most of the money that goes into salaries and any of those areas that should be for teachers, they're adding all of these new administrators and putting that money into administration. They're not putting it into teachers. Well, you used to have, both of my parents were educators. My dad was a superintendent, my mom was a teacher, and she became a principal. And so I grew up in education, I watched this. And when I was growing up, you would have a principal of a medium-sized school, maybe an assistant principal, and that was pretty much it. Maybe a counselor, and then all the rest were teachers. Now you have about half of that group as administrators, and the other half are teachers, and the teachers are not getting the raises that they need, and all these administrators are getting all this extra money that's layered and layered and layered every single year, and that's why when you then that pushes back to the teachers, and they're told you're going to do this, and then the unions come in so that when a teacher really excels, they're stifled, and everybody gets paid the same. You got a great teacher, push them down, everybody gets paid the same. And then the administrators get all the money, and they're telling the teachers, you're going to do this or this or this, and that's where all the SEL and the transgenderism and all that teaching gets pushed back into the schools, because it's an upside down paradigm that until we fix that, you'll never be able to fund education properly. Because anytime they get extra money, well, they just add another vice principal and pay them $150,000 a year, and the teachers are still making less than $100,000 a year. It doesn't make sense. But that's the system that we built in education. The way we stop that, in fact, I had this conversation early in this session, like back in February, with some people that work with education. And I said, how do we fix this? And they said, I won't tell you everything they said because we're not allowed to talk about it. But they said when we get the right people in positions of leadership in this state, we need to tear down this whole education system starting. And by the way, that's not that difficult to do. You think it's this big behemoth that you can't fix. We can fix it. Do you know that there are people throughout the United States, there are groups now, small private companies that are starting up all over the United States, that they say, okay, we're going to provide a teacher for 15 students. And that teacher will walk the students, let's say, from 1st to 4th grade. Okay? They're paid by the parents. They're not paid by the state. No state funding, nothing. And you have one teacher that walks 15 students through, and that teacher can get paid so much money because there's one teacher for those 15 students. And some states, because they don't have the funding tied to the student from that state, when they get state money, they can pay this teacher $250,000 a year. And they walk with these students, and the education is better, it is more solid, it's more hands-on, and that's a system that is popping up all across the United States right now, where parents are saying we will pay less money, get better education for a handful of students, rather than send them into the machine, the system, and they get less care for more money from the state. That's an interesting model to me. It's all private. It's all, it's capitalism at its best, right? And it's for the education of the students. And these students are coming out pretty strong in a lot of these programs. So yeah, that was more answer than you wanted, but.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious. I've talked to both you and Rebecca about financial protection for Coloradans, the takings where banks can, if banks go bankrupt, they can take your money, my money, Governor Polis's money, the Democrats' money. It's Lehman Brothers was a case study. There, and South Dakota has passed a bill that says you can't do that. It's state securities laws. Related to that, Catherine Austin Fitz, who used to work for Drexel Burnham, she worked in HUD, the Treasury Department, the military. She's talking about the World Banks taking over the country and things that state legislators can do. A couple of examples: State Bank, stopping the digital ID, private currencies and credit cards. What are the chances of getting some of this stuff at least introduced? Maybe we can waste the Democrats' time talking about financial freedom. They're going to take their money too. I mean, is there what can we do to get some of those bills out on the table and discussed and maybe passed?
Yeah. So the conversation has started. It's been started in certain settings, like Independence Institute had an article recently about this. If you guys remember the case study for this, and I believe this is what it was, I believe it was a practice trial to see if they could get away with it, was Greece. If you guys remember Greece, what was it, not the movie, the country, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, somewhere in that window, where Greece was struggling financially, they were trying to pull out of the euro, all this other stuff, and the government basically just took out everybody's money. Overnight, nobody in Greece had money in their accounts anymore. Which kind of makes you want to hide it in your mattress, like my great-grandparents did, you know. But that, I believe that was the test case for the World Economic Forum. I believe they poked that to see if they could get away with it. And they did. It can happen in America just as it can in any other country, unless we specifically make laws against this. But here's the problem that's going to happen. And I do think we need to have the conversation in the legislative level, right? That's probably the worst place to have it, but it's at least can be there. I think maybe the next governor should have it as like a press conference, collective conference, where you bring a bunch of people together and discuss it. Because that's where it's going to get a lot more traction, okay? But here's part of the problem, because I've studied with Dakota's doing this and saying you can't take our money, right? There's a few problems with that on the state level, that the federal government is still the federal government. And if we get the wrong person in the White House and we get the wrong people, which was a little tenuous, it was a little scary who could actually be president right now over who is president. They would be already having these conversations at the federal level. So let's say in a state, we say you can't do this. But if your bank is federally insured, FDIC, federally insured, then how much control can you have against the federal government? Because they're insuring it, why can't they also have access to it? Now, I don't think it's right. I think it's immoral and lack of integrity. I think it's against the law. But we're talking about federal government that was putting people in jail for what they said was an insurrection that wasn't. And so where does that stop? In our state, we put Tina Peters in jail just because she ran against the Secretary of State with evidence that the elections were corrupt. So we're already in the place where if the government says they're going to do it, I don't know that the people have much power, except for a complete revolution like we saw before, a civil war that we saw before. I don't mean a physically violent one for all of those that are recording for the media, but a true revolution that says we're tired of our government doing this to us. Now, because President Trump is president, if the states make the law now, the states will be protected because the federal government won't step in. What happens when you get a Kamala Harris or a Governor Polis into the president's seat? Now you've got a problem because the federal government will swoop in against state law on some things. Right now the conversation is all, no, we have sovereignty of statehood, therefore we can have abortions, we can do all this stuff. And the federal government is saying no. What happens when that's reversed? And states are saying, no, we are sovereign. The federal government says, we're not going to go by that anymore. We're going to swoop in, which they've already done in a lot of ways. They've done in very passive ways, like bailing out car dealerships and banks and things like that. What if they do the reverse of that and say, to keep our country sovereign, because it's too big to fail, we need to take 2% from every American. Right? What will stop that? State law won't stop that, because that's a federal government issue. We still need to be having a conversation and passing the laws, but we need to be making sure that they're passed at the federal level. But really, it's already against the law to do that. That's part of the problem, is we have, you know, most people in our country right now think the Federal Reserve actually is a government agency. It's not a government agency. It's a private agency that we have given way too much power to from the federal government. So that's already an inkling of how this whole thing could be disguised and used against us. And so it is an important conversation, and depending on who the next governor is, we probably will have that conversation. Because it is, South Dakota is not the only state that started having this conversation. Okay, I know Utah has already started having it, Oklahoma's already started having it. So there are some things that are happening. It's a kind of wait and see kind of thing. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. First off, I want to give it up to District 49 for passing, narrowly passing that, for the Fairness and Safety Act for our female athletes to participate with other female athletes and not dudes pretending to be females. And my question to you is, once they put all that stuff in the state law, because I'm really not up to date on how y'all do all that stuff, but if you get elected, are you able to dismantle some of them crazy ass laws that they put into place in the state? Crazy laws that they have supporting all the non-common sense type ideology. We need to bring common sense back to our state and get it right again.
Yeah, there is actually, let me just talk in a general sense.
I would too.
The governor actually has quite a bit of power in those arenas. You're seeing where President Trump started doing these executive orders. You know, those are not laws, they're orders, and so they're very, very strong suggestions, but they're not laws. Okay, that's one thing to keep in mind. The governor has similar powers, not exactly the same, but they have similar powers when it comes to executive orders. In fact, some of the things that we have in the state of Colorado that people think are laws are not actually laws. They're executive orders. Specifically with firearms, there's two things that people have always assumed are laws, but they're actually executive orders by Governor Polis. But most people treat executive orders like laws. And to some extent they should. But then what happens, the way an executive order is supposed to work is you pass this executive order and then the legislature looks at that the next year and decides whether they're going to make it into a law. Now that's the way it's supposed to work. It's been decades and decades since it's worked at the state or the federal level like that. We just kind of run with them. The governor does have a lot of power in those kind of things, and one of the things, let me use one example with this. Let's say the cartel, the Venezuelan cartel, okay? Governor Polis could have shut this down in 30 minutes. All you have to do is bring the National Guard in and make it happen. That's how simple it is. Depending on who the next governor is, I feel pretty sure that he will do away with the cartel day one. It is possible. When it comes to any of the things being done to our children and things like that, our next governor, I've heard the rumor, is going to veto any bill that has to do with children, abortion, parental rights, or any of those kind of things. You can't stop this stupidity. Now, one of the things you have to do is also back some of this stuff up, and you can do that, depending on how the law is developed, you can do that through executive orders. You can also do it through how each of the departments work. I'll give you another example using the drug cartel stuff. Right now, it is against the law for sheriffs and police to interact with ICE. They cannot pick up the phone and call ICE. So if they arrest somebody, and guys, I'm not over-exaggerating this, okay? You can talk to the sheriffs and police about this. If they arrest somebody that has committed murder, let's say they even watch it go down, if that person is an undocumented illegal immigrant, they have to release them. They cannot call ICE and tell ICE, we're releasing a murderer. They just have to release them. And there's even video, maybe some of you guys have seen this, of a illegal illegal immigrant criminal that was released and attacked somebody in the parking lot of the prison. It's on video to try to take their car so that they could have a car. This is 10 seconds after leaving prison, or jail, but they couldn't do anything about it because they can't talk to ICE. That's the law in Colorado. As governor, you can actually say, no, I make it an executive order that ICE now must work with sheriff, must work with police officers. You could do that as an executive order. I've already looked into this stuff. A lot I've looked into this stuff. And I've also got a guy that it's part of a team that I'm working with for some of my future right now that he has a politics and policy group out of Washington State. And for the last 8 months, I have been, every single week, I've been going to school learning how our Constitution worked, learning how our statutes work. I thought I knew that pretty good from being a representative, and I realized I didn't know near as much as I thought I did. But he's teaching me how to be a governor. This team, this company teaches senators and congressmen and governors, and he actually interacts with President Trump on a regular basis to teach these guys how to do that job. And so I've been going to school for 8 or 9 months now, learning how to be a governor. Because whoever gets to the governor's seat, when he gets there, he wants to be ready day one. And I've already got a lot of my stuff already lined out. First 100 days, policy, Doge, department heads, leadership team across the state, a budget that's going to cut billions day one. A lot of this stuff it's already in the computer with me. So.
Resumes.
How was that, Ken?
Resumes in your mailbox.
Kind of a naive question because I don't really understand the state politics very well, but most of Colorado is red. You got a huge blob of blue, obviously, in the Boulder, Denver area. Do the red parts of the states get their fair share of the revenues that go into the state coffers? As I know that sounds naive, but I was just kind of wondering how tax money is distributed back out to the different regions of the state.
It's distributed very unfairly. It is, the rural areas are left wide open. In fact, there were 2 bills that were passed this year. One of them is going to gut hospitals in rural communities, and one of them, twinned with that, is going to shut down a lot of hospitals over the next few years because of inappropriate revenue stream, where it's going to, the things they're charging. And that's just one example, but there's a lot of stuff. Mental health, a lot of mental health budget was cut for rural areas, but not for urban areas in Colorado. And you can just go down the line. Our governor does not like a few basic things. He does not like the agricultural industry in Colorado. He acts like he does, but he doesn't, because he pushes bills constantly that hurt farmers and ranchers, hurt them desperate. Okay. Even simple things like how to use pesticides and simple things. But when they instituted, these people in the House have no idea how to do any of that. They don't know how pesticides work. They don't know any of this stuff. But they'll pass a bill because the governor told them to. And it may be the grass along the edges. That's one of them that was looked at this year. But when you do that, it's going to destroy a lot of crops in the process. But they don't care because they don't want the agricultural area of Colorado. They want that. Let me give you the dirty little secret. You're going to see this over the next few years, depending on who's governor. But they don't want farming and ranching in Colorado. The state wants to own all that land. They've been coming after that for years, and they want every single inch of Colorado. And the reason, you may have gotten your reasons, 2 reasons. Water is the first one, and the second one is mineral rights. Mineral rights are changing quite extensively in Colorado right now. I talked to a guy a year and a half ago about this. We have lithium in Colorado, and we have cobalt in Colorado, but we can't get it because the state won't let us. But we'll use slave trade from South Africa to get our cobalt and our lithium for our electric cars. Me and another representative, Ty Winter, ran a bill about that this last year, trying to say, no, we don't agree. In fact, I think almost every Republican was on that bill. But that we can't get it. I talked to the guy, he says, I know where it is. I'm trying to buy the land. They won't let me buy the land. And this is a very wealthy person in Colorado. Because, let me just give you the rest of it. Because our governor and a couple other people, one of them was a used-to-be governor, they have been working to buy up those lands in Colorado. That is illegal. That is against the law. But they've been working on it so that they can own the land, so that they can own the lithium and the cobalt, and specifically in southeastern Colorado, they're trying to get all of the land down there because there's a lot of minerals under the ground, and then also control the water, because water controls everything in Colorado. So that's where when you're saying is it being funneled properly, no, it's intentionally not being funneled properly. They're trying to shut down rural Colorado, specifically Front Range rural Colorado. And our rural representatives get up and fight for this stuff constantly. But we're a tiny little voice in the House right now. We have to pick up seats this next in 26. And we think we're going to, but we have to pick up seats. So.
Sir, the gentleman over here mentioned about corruption, and you also mentioned about corruption by the present governor as well as the former governor. My question would be, will the next governor, if being from the conservative side, will they look into the corruption issue? Will they be audited? Will they be brought to justice? That's what I want to know.
The simple answer is yes. How that works is going to be, there's layers of it. Okay. So we're close enough today, I'm going to quit tiptoeing around this. I already have a Doge ideology set up, and I've already talked to 2 people about being part of this, people that get it and they understand. Also, we're already talking to, in a roundabout way, I'm not personally, but we're talking to Elon Musk's computer nerds that built the algorithms that are doging at the federal government level. Did you know right now there is about to come out an app for your phone that you can download the Colorado state budget to your phone and it'll doge the state budget. They were created by these goobs, these guys that do this, right? These guys are geniuses. They have built algorithms that can hunt through all kinds of budgets and look at this stuff. And so we're already talking to them too. We're going to set up a couple of other things. We're going to set up a team that, so right now it's supposed to be a group that works for the governor's office. That anytime a bill comes out of the House or the Senate, they analyze it on constitutional veracity. Does it match the Constitution? Does it disagree with the Constitution? That already exists in our state. But that's a joke because they're going to run whatever bill they can. I don't even know if that group exists or has been filled, but it is in statute that that's supposed to be. I'm going to set that up again. And there's another representative, he and I have been talking about this, to set up a group of lawyers that will immediately address whether and this is not like the state law, these will be an independent group of people that will check the constitutionality and the legality, because those are actually 2 different things, of a bill that comes out of the House or the Senate. So if it comes to the governor's desk, before the governor signs it, it goes through this system. And then we would have the ability to kick that back into the House and the Senate, say it is not constitutional according to this line and this line and this line. That is already supposed to be happening, but it's not happening. So there's a handful of things that fall in line of that. Immediately we will address the corruption in the budget, because there's a lot of just as a representative sitting there, I see corruption every day. Money that's going places it's not supposed to, and being lied about. Oh, it's going to go here. Well, we all know it's not going there. Okay. So all of that stuff will be put together. Another thing that will happen is immediately, and I've already got some of the team that will do this, is we will immediately redo election integrity in the state and deal with that. Because if you don't deal with that, you're never going to get to the bottom of the other corruption, because they'll just keep putting the corrupt people in the seats to continue the corruption. And so there's a handful of things, I could talk about that for like 30, 40 minutes, but there's already things that we've already got built and designed to accomplish that. If, for some reason, I became governor, there's people going to go to jail day 1 that we know. Well, let me say that differently. They'll be indicted day 1. Because we've been watching them break the law. We've been watching them for years break the law in Colorado, and enough's enough on that. We're going to stop that stuff.
Now that you're back from the Capitol, I'm assuming you've heard about what happened in Colorado Springs a couple of weeks ago about the raids. Are you going to be talking to the mayor at all to make sure that our cities being protected?
So I put out a couple videos about what went down there. I haven't talked to the mayor, but I've talked to sheriff and some other officers. In fact, what I did is I sent them a letter congratulating them on how well they did with that. They've been attacked in the media wrongly. They did what they were supposed to do, and they did it with excellence and precision. They weren't just rounding up people sitting on the curb and taking them to jail. That's just stupidity of the media. Okay. I have not talked to the mayor about this, but I have sent emails. We'll see if he responds or his office responds. Let me give you a little bit deeper insight into that, kind of a bigger picture. So we know that Colorado, the DEA said 3 weeks ago that Colorado is now the national headquarters for the cartel in the United States. Venezuelan drug cartel, Aurora, Colorado. That is now the national headquarters. For places, and there's places like Chicago and Detroit and Atlanta and stuff that have this, but Aurora is the headquarters. And so then we see this 180,000 rounds of ammunition coming through south central Colorado, coming from Utah, but it actually originated in Mexico. This is just a van that was accidentally stopped. This wasn't a sting or something like that they've been watching. The reason I say that is because that lets you know that there was a lot more that have been coming through there. Guns and ammunition. Why? Because, and it was coming to Pueblo, those 100 illegal immigrants that were found at this nightclub. First, it wasn't a nightclub, it's a bar. And it's not open at that time of night. So why were 100 illegal immigrants? Let's say it was a nightclub. Was it illegal immigrant night at the nightclub? This was a group of drug cartel that were going to try to set the same thing up here in Colorado Springs. That's what it was. Okay? That's not going to be put out on the media because the sheriffs can't take that chance of saying that stuff right now. But that's what it was. And the drug cartel is being armed up in the state of Colorado. As I'm not trying to be conspiratorial, this is just reality. Why would all of these guns and ammunition be coming to Colorado from Mexico? It's because they're arming all of this stuff up and they're getting ready while at the same time taking our ability to own firearms away. You realize Venezuela, the reason that the government changed in Venezuela was because of a cartel coup. I believe that on a nationwide scale, that there are people that are building this up so that to cause great mayhem across the United States during President Trump's presidency. And this is why, not trying to scare people, but this is why that the citizens need to be armed. Because our leadership has known about this for a long time. And this is why all of a sudden, President Trump has Tom Homan going to all these different states, because they know this is happening. And our previous administration was helping set this up through Soros and some other groups like that. And so this is why that 100-person illegal immigrant roundup in Springs would not have happened if Kamala Harris was president. The reason it happened is because Trump is president and he's shutting these things down all over the United States. But this has been in the works for a long time. And this is why nobody is stopping. Did you know actually constitutionally it is part of the job of the governor of Colorado? It says in the Constitution that they are supposed to defend the state of Colorado against foreign enemies. Foreign. In other words, Venezuelan drug cartels. It is the job of the governor to shut them down. And not only did he not shut them down, he denied that they were there. This is my argument with Attorney General Weiser also, because he keeps saying, oh, nothing to see here. And now he's trying to sue Trump over Trump saying we're going to shut down these cartels. So here's the question. At the very least, they are working intentionally against disarming foreign enemies in our country. At the most, they're somehow involved. And that's where we need to be concerned about. At the very, very least, we have watched them on TV work with the cartels to keep the cartel alive in Aurora. Why? Why is that still there? Why are those people still there? Why are they still owning that apartment complex? Why have they been allowed to displace all these people, including killing them and raping them, attacking them? Why are they still there unless there is other intentions by our government, state government, that is nefarious here? Why? It is a broken machine that is helping. I mean, when we made fentanyl legal enough, you can carry enough fentanyl to kill 700 people. We made that legal in Colorado. This is the question, why? Why would we make that much fentanyl legal for an individual to carry around unless there is underhanded, nefarious reasons behind it? And I believe that's the purpose here. And so this is why, again, I've talked to SWAT team members, CBI, state police, everything, and they've all said the exact same thing. If they would not have made the police stand down, they could have handled that in 30 minutes. They could have taken that whole cartel out in 30 minutes. But they didn't want them taken out. They want them there. And that's what we need to be worried about instead of Colorado.
Okay, so, yeah, this is all, to your point, it feels like a behemoth. I mean, everything in Colorado that can go wrong, has gone wrong, is wrong. And so my question is, you mentioned, and I think it's true, should some other governor, should someone else become governor, maybe we can get rid of what is causing some of the corruption in the state. My question, though, is how do we get there? Because we still have Dominion machines. We still have mail-in ballots. How are we going to, and to your point, none of the legislators care. They don't care what the people think. The governor doesn't care what the people think. So when we go to vote, is it just going to have to be a Trump-esque kind of thing where the vote is so overwhelming that the machines and the ballot, I mean, we get four ballots still mailed to our house of people that don't live there anymore. And we have called, they have called, these are grown kids, married, moved out. We could. So anyway, I guess that's my question. As much as we want this to change, and we're all here because we want change, how are we going to get there when the system is so broken, it's so against us all? Is it just going to have to be this overwhelming thing like the vote for Trump was so overwhelming they just couldn't deny it? Is that the thing that has to happen in 2026? What has to happen?
There's a few things. Let me give you some good news, I think, okay? Because what you're saying is valid. We are so broken and corrupt on every single level. You look at anywhere in the state and it's broken, it's corrupt. Okay, and it's being controlled, and our voting is corrupt. Okay, I believe Kelty's district is one of them. 3 major districts in our state this year where I can point to you and show you it was overwhelmingly corrupt. Okay, Rebecca was voted in by 3 votes when it all finished. She wasn't. She was voted in by hundreds and hundreds, and I can prove that. Just statistically looking backwards over the years and over the last election, what happened with that. So we know that even just in a casual glance, it's corrupt, okay? Here's the good news though, there's a few things. One is, too big to fail, that needs to happen, we've got to get out. I've been traveling all over the state for the last 2 years trying to get pastors to wake up. Because pastors are asleep, and well, pastors aren't asleep, they're kind of intentionally avoiding the subject. But here's the good news about that. And right before the election, about 3 weeks before the election, the 79, I started getting emails and things from pastors that I'd gone literally all over the state, and this was before I had any further aspirations. I was just doing this because I'm a pastor. This is my heart. The church has been asleep and we're losing our kids. Now, I don't think the average person sitting in a church is asleep. I believe that they're following the lead of their leadership, and their leadership is being quiet. They're encouraging them not to be political and all this other stuff. But that is changing. At a high level, that is changing in our state. And I could talk about this just for an hour, but just to throw a few things out. I used to be traveling around begging, meeting with 4, 5, 6 pastors at a time, begging them, please, consider this. Consider what it means to truly be a shepherd. Consider what it means to educate your people properly from the Bible in these times. And then churches started waking up. We were at a meeting last night in Denver with a group of pastors that they first contacted me like February, March. And they said, we want to have a conference. We want you to do the conference and tell us as pastors. And they said, we're going to have about 200, 250 pastors there in South Denver. And we need you to tell us, in this climate, in this context, how do we wake up and how do we start the conversation with our churches? I'm in tears when I'm having these meetings now. When 1312 happened, we're now having pastors come up to the Capitol and speak. Not just people from churches, but pastors. By the droves, the last one, the day that the 1312 went to the Senate, there was about 7 or 8 pastors up on the steps. There was about 50 pastors out because I had them raise their hand. The whole West Slope, I've had pastors come up to the Capitol from Cortez, Pagosa Springs, drive all the way over there with 10 pastors, 12 pastors, a handful of times throughout this session. And they came for one reason. They want to talk to me about how can we wake the pastors up in our area. Then I had a pastor come like 2 weeks ago, met me right outside the chambers. I went out there and there was 3 of them, 3 pastors standing there. And they said, we want you to come up to our area and talk to pastors up here. This is starting to happen all over the state. I've been begging for 2 years and now it's exploding. And this one was kind of funny because the guy said, we want you to come and talk to some pastors. We think we can get 20 pastors in our county together and you can come talk to them. And I said, that's awesome. I said, I don't care how many, 20 is good. They said, well, that's every pastor in our county. So those are good odds. But here's the thing. This is the first layer. If the church wakes up, Colorado's a red state. We're not a blue state, we're a red state. But the church is voting, well, before this last election, the church is voting around 40 to 45%. That means more than half of the church is not voting. This last election cycle, about 55% of the church voted. That's still not okay, but way better than it had been. The church wakes up, which is happening. We're a red state. Here's another one dynamic that is happening, and I talked to a business owner in Pueblo for about an hour this morning about this concept. But we're seeing Pueblo change. Pueblo used to be just strong blue, never anything but blue. But now, even though I think she's made some mistakes, and I don't know how conservative she is. We do have a Republican mayor in Pueblo now. And we have a Republican commissioner where all of those positions used to be all blue. Okay, why? One of the major reasons is because Pueblo, not just Pueblo County, but the city of Pueblo, mostly Hispanic, right? A huge percentage of Hispanics. The Hispanic population all over the state is starting to switch. And they're saying, we're done with this. And the younger Hispanic crowd specifically is saying, this is not who we are. We're about family, we're about our children. And when the state says we're going to come take your children, the Hispanic community has said no. And now they're rising up. All across Denver, the Hispanic community is rising up. And that's going to be one of the biggest demographical shifts in the state of Colorado this year. You put some of these things together, and here's the last one that I think, okay, I'm just positing this. I don't have anything to base this on except just looking at all the pieces of the puzzle. So we know Secretary of State Griswold is running for Attorney General. The reason she is running for Attorney General is that's the only position in the state she can hold and not go to jail. She knows she's going to go to jail. I've said it to her in front of the whole entire House and Senate. She's going to go to jail. So she says, well, I'll run for Attorney General. Right? So here's the thing. She knows that the entire state is watching her now. She's been very corrupt in the election system. She's been the problem in the election systems, coupled with the Dominion machines. All right? She knows that's going to be watched like crazy in this cycle. She also knows that it's going to be watched from the federal level with Attorney General Bondi and everything else, because we're already seeing that being said at the federal level. Right? Then you have Trump saying you have to have an ID for federal elections and all this sort of stuff. You put all that together, and I think, and maybe I'm hoping more than I know, but I think that she's going to have to at least run a mostly fair election this next cycle, because there's too much, there's going to be too much scrutiny of this and just pressing down. And everybody is watching the machines and trying to analyze all the data coming out of the machines now because of the last election, the last 2 election cycles. So I'm hoping, I think probably, but specifically if the federal government says, okay, Colorado, how about we send federal watchdogs down to watch the elections? That's where we're headed right now, right? And if I have any say with the people that I'm talking to about this, which I'm getting more and more into those circles every day. I have a phenomenal team of people for something that are helping me with this. I really believe that we will get as close as possible without a complete overhaul. But once the governorship changes, we will have a complete overhaul. So we'll see. But we're going to need a lot of help to get all of those pieces together in that. But all the rest of it, the too big to fail, we're already seeing that building greatly in the state of Colorado. And I've got analytic teams that are showing us this at huge levels. These guys are guiding every single step for me right now and showing me all of it. So it's good, and I'm excited about it. Are we supposed to be done at 8 or 8:30? Okay.
Sir, I just had a really quick question. As probably the youngest person in this room, and I've been bothered that a lot of my friends and colleagues don't find it important enough to come to these debates. How would you say you're going to get these younger kids interested in actually listening to what really matters, what you have to say? Regardless of whether it's just, the Christian side, but the actual side that matters even more than just the belief system. These kids who don't believe that way can see that changes our country. When they've been born in the cartels, with every piece of what they learned is a different, but still Christian, but not quite. There's somebody you can reach out to that is still there, and they say that we're so bad, as being half Hispanic and half white, I've been very much hated both ways, and I'm young. So they tell ourselves that there's no reason for us to actually look into voting. And I try to convince them there's a reason to vote for you. And how would you say you reach out to the younger generation? Because none of them are here, and I wish they would actually care about understanding what it means. It's important.
Take offense because I'm young.
It's a very good question, and this is some of our strongest numbers that we've been looking at. So I taught a class at CU about politics last year. I taught a couple other settings, town hall classes with college-age students. Okay, here's one of the things that we're realizing. All right, so every generation has its rebels, right? Doesn't matter how old you are in this room, your generation had your rebels at the time, right? That's what Fonzie on Happy Days was, right? He was the rebel for the 1950s. Everybody's got their group. The statistics that we're seeing across the entire United States right now is there is a huge turning in the youngest crowd, and I'm saying 25 and under. We're seeing this huge turn across the United States where the new rebels that are rising up are people that are pushing against their parents' generation, just like every teenage, early 20s do, push against their parents. But what's happening is they're turning conservative. This is phenomenal to me to watch. And we're seeing it more in the minority groups than even in the basic white class group across the United States. We're seeing a pushback. Simple things like that we were headed the opposite in the 80s in my generation, high school generation, which is now we're seeing an entire generation that are saying we're not going to take drugs, we're not going to sleep around, we're going to be abstinent until we get married and things like that. Nobody's telling them to do this. Society's telling them the opposite. In my generation, they told us, "Oh, you shouldn't do these things." And in today's generation, it's just like whatever goes. And the generation is saying, "No, you're not our boss. We're not going to have sex before marriage." This is happening. It's happening all across the United States. And when I go to the college campuses and speak about this, look at all this stuff that's happening with Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk is going to these universities, and when he's going to you'll have a handful of people come up and they'll be, you're wrong, we need to do this. But you'll hear the crowd shouting behind a conservative mindset. Now, I didn't see this coming. But anytime I get out and I have the conversation, that generation is very respectful. When I was at CU, they were very respectful to me. They disagreed. In fact, they told me the only demographic that is not allowed to speak their opinion is the Christians. Every other demographic, every religious group, everyone, they're all allowed to speak, but not the Christians. And so I talked to them about that for a while, and almost everybody in the class finally went, yeah, I guess that's wrong. Back up 15 years and they would never have agreed with that. They would shouted me out of the room. But this younger crowd, not only are they pushing back, this is also one of the most culturally educated crowd, not necessarily academically educated, but culturally educated. They are much wider understanding across the planet than anywhere my generation was. It's the generation right above them that are the struggle, right? It's the, what are they called? Millennials. The millennials. They're the problem. The crowd under them is looking at the millennials and saying, you guys don't have a clue. And they're making better decisions, right? So all I have to do is get with them. We've got a lot of things planned where I'm just going to be sitting in the congregation, in the setting where they're the congregation and I'm talking, right? And here's the next group I'll tell you about. That it's a part of this. It's the same part of the conversation. It's just a demographic difference. One of the groups that is listening to me the most, I go into these settings and I have speeches. I've done this probably half a dozen to 10 times. Where I go into these settings is the LGB community. Not the TQ+, but the LGB. I've been invited to speak in many of those settings, and we have some coming up in the future in Denver, where I'm going to go into those settings and speak. Because why? They understand somebody like me separating from the crowd and saying, no, I'm not going to play the game. Whether it's from my party or the other party, I'm not going to play the game. I'm going to stand on what I believe, and they respect that. They don't agree with how I'm standing on it, and I don't agree with how they're standing on it. But they get it, and they are the most respectful group that I've ever talked to. So you take the 25 and under and the gay community, and they listen to me and respect me more than almost any other group out there. And I'm not sure, it's been foreign to me, but I'm also not worried or scared to go into the setting, and I think people respect that too. If you'll just go and have a conversation, people respect that. Respect them and they'll respect you back most of the time. Now, the transgender group does not. They do not respect you when you come and talk to them. But the LGBT group do. Who knew? And I think that's part of the same subject with the younger crowd too. Let me show you this from like a pastor point of view. One of the largest groups in our church is the under 30 group. I am not a weak-kneed preacher. I don't know if you pick up on that, but I preach about sin. I'm not worried about whether people like what I'm saying. I know what the Bible says, and so people get it and they respect it and they understand. And we have a large group of people under 30 in our church that love it. They're drawn to it. That's not the way it was 20 years ago, but it is the way it is now. And all of us, specifically the older ones in the crowd, pay attention to this because you can actually have legitimate conversations with a 25-year-old, which is much more difficult with a 30 or 33-year-old. Do you know that? Because I've had conversations with them on a regular basis.
And this will be the last question.
Yes, sir.
I'm just laughing. You are such a bright light. I commend you entirely for taking a stand. I just want to know, from your perspective, the plain, unvarnished truth about the status of your campaign.
Plan.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for asking that question. Mr. I've never met before. Well, actually, I have met you before, but, so here is where we are. We've already got all of our ducks in a row. We know where we're at. We're light years ahead of anybody on either side of the aisle. We're really doing well. I'm very, very pleased where we are. Very pleased with the next few months. You'll see by the end of the summer the results of what I'm saying right now. But we're very strong. My team is the best in the country. They've won many, many campaigns, about 39 campaigns so far, from senator, governor, all kinds of things. And I'm just very pleased. These guys are the best of the best, and they're teaching me, they're guiding me, but they're also respecting my message, which is huge for me. I will not compromise on my message, and they know that, so they support that, and they carry me. They carry me in that. So that's all I'll say right now. But we're in a very, very strong place, a good place, way ahead of what I thought I would be at this stage of the game. So yeah.
All right, everyone, please, I'm going to bring Gordon up here in a second, but please give. Here you go.
Let me say that management does not endorse the next statement. ScottBottoms.com.